Let's bring in a RISE analyst and associate professor of law, Dr. Sam Amadi. Thanks so very much for joining us. It's like the whistle has been sounded, or the gong has been, sounded, and the race is now open. June 3rd, all parties must have their presidential candidates in place. Absolutely. How feasible is this when quite a number of the parties have not done their convention, even the ruling party?
Well, this is inevitable.
It's the law.
It's a jacket. So you have to fit your neck in the straight jacket, otherwise they're gone. So they have to now take seriously the issue around primaries. APC is in a more difficult situation because they need to conduct their party convention for the NWC. So maybe if this came out earlier, maybe they could have collapsed the two, but thankfully they're going to do that in March, which means by the time they get to March 26 and get the ESCO, the National Working Committee, ready, they won't have any period of luxury to start planning the convention. So from April 4th, thereabout to June 3rd, you have to wrap it up. So basically, less than a couple of weeks after this ESCO goes into place, they start the work. Again, what this means also is that those who are already on ground, as the Nigerians say, those the candidates who have structure, who are already engaged earlier, who have head start, who have started in earnest, probably stand a better chance than those who are still planning to declare. But the saving grace is that there's a provision for consensus. So if the parties are stuck and they don't have time to plan elaborate direct or indirect election, maybe they trigger the consensus framework, and hopefully, and the difficult thing is that if you look at the calendar too, the time to, that means you must have concluded every litigation, settlement, reconciliation meetings before that 4th. By the 5th, the portal is open, and then it has another window, it gets shut, in which case, so you just little room for the fallouts we expect from contentious convention. So we just watch and see how the parties are stronger, that's more cohesive, where the candidates are much more give and take, where the culture of give and take and fair play is available, is ingrained, will probably have less problem. Those who are still caught up in brinkmanship and process of attrition may find themselves struggling to feel that meet the timeline.
Well, I saw the INEC chairman there, Mahmood, really upbeat with members, with his commissioners about, first signing the Electoral Act and the rest, and that is going to give them a lot of, space to work, expands their scope, particularly the transmission of, votes electronically and the rest. And how significant, too, is this to the electoral process?
I think we've probably crossed the last, removed the last hurdle. Oftentimes, the legal uncertainty, some lawyers hold the view that INEC does not need extra law to continue their electronic transmission, the beavers. I hold that view. But of course, the Nigerian courts have proved unreliable. They can upset anything. So with this clarity now in the law, there's no question around the powers of INEC to do what. So that gives us an advantage. We have clarity. So INEC can continue with those electronic transmission with issues around, voting credibility. But the key issue here, and again, INEC has funds for 1 year. The funds has to be released. So that's what the law says, that they must have their funds ready so that issues around poor or known for funding of projects is taken away. More importantly is the notion around primaries. This act tries to zero down on undemocratic practices. So even if you're going to do consensus or anything, it spells out procedure, and INEC will be in a better position now, and gives INEC the authority, which has been missing, to disqualify. INEC can now, if you snatch ballot box or do anything to get yourself elected, INEC can now fall on this new electoral act and take actions that they ought to take as a regulator. But the key issue here, we see evidence from FCT election, the by-elections yesterday. The reports, in Ngobala, for example, where I've been monitoring, it is so much violence. So what INEC has to work on now is no longer the legal framework. It's not the managerial. How do you control violence? How do you deal with corrupt officials?
It's not in their own position to do that, because you have all the other stakeholders,
Absolutely.
like the security organizations.
But the point is that the security has, you see, ought to be complementary to INEC. So the point is, they ought to submit to INEC's leadership, because the electoral process is a civil process. But what we have seen oftentimes that these security officers, like report to
they want to steal the show.
Exactly, and they respond to the governors, to executive authority, who now misdirect them. So INEC has to probably get engaged with institutions and create a protocol that allows them. Because if you don't, those are the real challenge to electoral.
I think from what you're saying, INEC can even still come out with certain laws that no governor, chief executives of a state, local government should move beyond its own polling unit. During the
or even say that every military, soldier, police to be deployed has to be certified by INEC and insulated from every. So
INEC would not know them now.
No,
it's only the authorities. Yes,
will submit to INEC.
Absolutely.
And then INEC will know that these are the officers working for us, and their movement is clearly choreographed. You don't have to have soldiers being used by politicians. That's what we have seen now. So we've moved from one hurdle. We've cleared a legal hurdle. We have now credible electoral voting and commission system. What we now lack is the whole management of the election. So we'll see people who will now go and hijack the beavers and distort it. So the work now is more of project delivery. How will INEC build its own resilience, its own integrity system? We've also seen very corrupt INEC. By the way, Mike Guinea prosecuted some of the return officers who were involved in corruption, a professor. So the human element now, we're dealing with now with the credibility of the management itself. We're done with significant good law. So we can say that this is significant good law. INEC has the financing now, hopefully, with this new law. INEC has the legal tools to take action. What we will now have to develop between now and next year is that top-notch managerial competence, integrity systems, and much more effective proactive management of all the incidences of election, including the mobilization of security. By the way, election is supposed to be civil. So but when we need security, we need to maintain law and order, and not to be involved or used by politicians to deal with the process of election or counter of result, as we are getting from places like maybe Ngobala or Yala in Cross River, where elections held yesterday. And of course, the FCC election. So we have made progress, but the real decider of the credibility and the freeness and fairness of the electoral process is actually the management of that process, not necessarily
the management of the process. You're not saying one that has been a canker one, a recurring decimal during elections like this, particularly when it's the general elections. That is logistics and the rest. Well, shouldn't INEC be planning now, looking at all the indices that have caused it some hiccups here and there?
I think the problem with planning is that if you have a culture that is not efficient and you're not dealing with it, if you look at INEC is an inherited institution. INEC, some people have argued that INEC staffing, some of them really need a drastic overhaul. You see, you don't build efficient processes on inefficient structural, institutional, or cultural practices. INEC keeps planning. INEC has time to plan. If you look at the way, the gung-ho manner in which the chairman announced the schedule, that means they are saying we're on top of this game. They have lined out what to do. Now the question is, things like, for example, technology malfunction. Are you also creating the capacity to test run this on time and certify that minimal error, 5% error? Or are you going to still be where we were and see that some of these things can't even, in localized election, off-season election, you can't even guarantee, like in Anambra, that these equipments will function up to 80%, 90%. So you are right about it. It's whether INEC can actually develop quick. Ramp up is capacity in terms of efficiency, in terms of integrity processes, and project management as a whole. For now, they have the time. The law is there. The funding hopefully will be available for them. It's now a question of internal capacity. And my sense is, look, the chairman, the commissioners might be very good, but the backup staff and the institutions and system and practices may not be such that can guarantee such hitch-free planning and execution.
If time permits me, let me just quickly ask this question. The Electoral Act, for example, gives 3 tiers or layers of how a presidential candidate is going to be selected and the rest. And what is INEC's role in this? You know, it's a party affair, but they still assume a supervisory role.
Absolutely.
Very quickly.
INEC has to ensure, first, they have to get the register of membership. INEC has to be then to notified and attend those events. INEC also has to ensure that they are democratic, which means, for example, if you are going to have direct, all party members will vote. If you're going to have indirect, the delegates you have specified in your rules, and this Electoral Act says that the parties must now specify in their law the process. So our next job is first oversight. Have you provided in your law? Have you followed their law? So INEC is no longer a bystander, go and write a report. INEC has to say that this primary did not conform to the provision of the Constitution.
All right, thank you. Thank you so very much, Associate Professor Sam Amadi, Arise Analyst, for shedding more light on the development in the INEC timetable for the general elections in 2020.